even worse, is it, the remains of Joe Dokes, Clyde Clucks? Who knows? But yeah, there is, when it comes to UFOs, danger, danger, Will Robinson.
Oh, yeah. That, and sometimes I even think like what you do, you get out to an isolated area. I mean, don't you ever worry about anything? I mean, besides, running across any creepy things like snakes or scorpions or stuff like that. But don't you ever worry about maybe being abducted or anything?
No, not really. I mean, I've crossed that point of where it's really going to take a heck of a lot to get me scared. Sure, I can get startled, but with my life and what I've experienced, what I've seen, it gets to the point of where, this is your roller coaster ride ticket. You're going to die. That's all there is to it. And don't be afraid. You try to find out as much as you can. You're here to grow your soul. You're here to acquire knowledge. And, don't... It's okay to be frightened, startled, but don't be scared. And that's the way I look at life. And no, and if I run across drug smugglers or people smugglers coming across the southern border, etc. here, and they're with AK-47s, well, I'm packing heat too, baby, and so is me and my associates. So we're, but again too, if we come across, and that's the end of us as far as we go the way of Mel Nadel, well, we did something that was, well, I guess the old cliche is, but there's a lot of truth to it. There are a lot of worse things worse than death.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that could be almost as bad as death, like dying in itself. I mean, I don't know. I just, I'm going to have a guest on here, I think next week, that was one of Dr. Lear's first patients that claims he was abducted and, had an implant, and Dr. Lear removed it from him. It just makes me wonder if there's so much more out there, and it just, slowly, I think, slowly the government's slowly letting it out that there is or could be, life out there to prepare the people, because I think, we've done a really good job of covering up everything in this country.
Right.
I mean, not just paranormal, anything. I mean, propaganda-wise. I mean, people thought Nazi Germany was really good with their propaganda machine. I think we are far better than they ever were. So,
We're the experts.
Pardon me, sir?
We're the experts.
Oh, yeah. I think there's none better than us. But it'd be so hard, to admit to, I mean, let's face it, if the government admitted that they were aliens abducting humans off of this planet, you know how many people would be panicking? I mean, I brought this up a couple of times on the show. War of the Worlds back in the 30s. Orson Welles did a radio play, and he clearly stated at the beginning of the play that this was a radio drama play, radio play. And he did like a 5-minute, explaining that it's nothing more than that. But the people who tuned in a couple minutes later, after it started, they started getting panicky. I mean, all across the country, people were gathering the guns and all this stuff because they thought we were being invaded, right? And there were some cases where, the husband killed his wife and kids and himself because he was worried about it, what would happen because of what he heard on the radio with these aliens, abducting people and killing them. And then there was cases where people jumped out of buildings of it, just the same thing. I don't know if society, even with all these years of Star Trek and all these other shows on movies and sci-fi and all that stuff, I don't know if the government did come out and say it tomorrow, Allan, I don't think that people could really accept it. There'll be a certain amount, yeah. They'll say, yeah, I knew they were there all the time, but I think the majority of the people out there would freak out.
Okay. Gary, I think what it is I don't think that the governments really care too much about the people freaking on out. I think what the bottom line on this one is about power and control, and they're going to lose their, the old saying, the emperor has no clothes. That's what will happen, and they'll lose their power and control. And there is for lack of better words, a nobility or the upper crust that does rule the world, that rules this country. And if people were going to start saying, oh, there's something on out there, and especially Americans, because Americans are the most creative that there is as far as modern beings go. One of the stories is okay, what you want is, the perfect soldier. You would have a British officer, a German sergeant, and an American private, because the American private is so creative. And that's what Americans will start doing. Well, okay, there's something on out there. The government has let us know that something's there. Let's find on out. Let's get the technology. Let's, like the old science fiction thriller TV show of here's a pellet and we put it into the gas tank and we're not going to have to gas on up for another 10 years. We'd start doing something like that and finding on out about this kind of technology, and that's going to be the end of the Five Sisters, the oil companies. At one time there was the Nine Sisters, now it's the Five Sisters. That's going to be the end of the banksters at Wall Street. That's what they do not want to have, is another American revolution of all these people saying, there's a better way, and we're going to turn over the apple cart. Now we're going to have a new ruling class of new people with money, and that's what they're afraid of. And as far as the panic goes, gosh,
that's where I really think,
okay.
If you take where the riots, in the 70s and all that happened, right? It started out, racial, but I know that's off the subject, but it didn't take long before it was vandalism and everything else that went, and looting and all that stuff. If all of a sudden, if they came out and said, hey, there is a species abducting human beings, and, that if you're abducted, you could be eaten. I'm just using that as thing. I would think people would start freaking out like you wouldn't believe. They would start getting to the point where they wouldn't pay their bills. The first thing in your mind is like survival. And there's so many people that are so crazy, survivalists out there. Doomsday would happen really fast.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that's why the government, if the government would have been clean and honest at the start, I think people could have handled it. But when you sit there and debunk everything for how many years since that's been going 60 years, debunking it. And, anytime somebody comes out with a claim that, they thought they saw a UFO, you'll get people saying, yeah, that was a UFO, right? But then you get a certain group of people, that debunk it. And, and the way they debunk it, they're doing it professionally.
Right. Yeah. That's okay with. I'll have to disagree with you on that one, though. But I as far as the panic goes, I don't think that Americans would go that way. I think it's just going to be about the control of it. Now, as far as what happened, like in 1940 in Ecuador, when they tried to do the War of the Worlds, again, too, they burned down the radio station, people got killed, all kinds of terrible things happened. But I guess I'm just being too sinister, but my thinking about this is that the whole, what we've got now, or what we've had for decades from behind since, JFK's assassination in '63, is about the usurping of the government and about the power elite controlling it. They do not want to let go of this power, and that's what they're most concerned about. And I can remember the riots. I can remember, let's hope that
I don't know.
that disclosure does come, that we behave. But one of the things about that the government has done is you're absolutely right. Operation Project Blue Book, that's just propaganda, and what you saw was a weather balloon.
Yeah, but Blue Book, you have to realize, I mean, I was really into reading Blue Book, the files and stuff like that when it was released. And it seemed like every time they came out, what was not where they were actually trying to find proof. It was to debunk it. That's all it was, to debunk every single one.
Yeah. And the best debunker, and he's passed on now, but it was Philip Glass. And, that guy could, he was like, he would make my skin crawl. That guy, anything, it's an illusion. You didn't see it. And you got to say to yourself, who is paying this man to go on out there and be this debunker? And then when you think about Project Blue Book, and you would think that it's going to be a brigade of specialists going out there investigating it. No, it's just a colonel and some sergeants and a couple of captains. And like you say, propaganda, don't believe your eyes. We know better.
Well, I had a friend years back, I would say this was in the mid-'80s, and he worked for a major airline as one of the vice presidents. Of course, they have more than one vice president, but he was a vice president of one of the divisions. But this was a major airline, which naturally went defunct at about that same time frame. But he was telling me, like, during World War, not during World War, but in Vietnam, they would fly from Japan or Guam, wherever it was, B-52s over to Vietnam to drop their load and come back. And he told me, like, on more than one occasion that off to his wing, they saw a UFO. And when he, got back and he reported, actually he said he even reported on the radio. When he got back, there was people there waiting for him to tell him, you never seen this before. And if you ever tell anybody you have ever seen anything like this, not just him, it was the whole crew of the plane, that their military career would be over. And even worse things could happen. He told me that happened. And then with the airline, and again, it was a major airline that was around for years and years and years that went under. He would tell me, that, because we got to become really good friends. And he told me that the same thing, occasionally one of their pilots saw a UFO. And, the UFO would be off to their wing and following them for a distance and then take off. Again, the same thing would happen. They would report they saw something strange, right? They land, and then all of a sudden the guys in the suits, were waiting there for the pilot to debrief them and tell them that they never seen it. And if they ever did see it, their family won't see them.
Right. Gary, there was this cattle mutilation that happened, I'm going to say about 5 years ago, and this is to the west of Santa Fe, southwest, appropriate place, out by Diablo Canyon, Devil's Canyon. And at this mutilation, you had the county police, the state police, and you also had a couple of FBI guys there. And you say to yourself, well, why is that there? Now, their excuse was, well, this is on Indian land. Well, as far as I know, where the Rio Grande was and where Diablo Canyon was, no, that was not on the reservation. That was not the res. But so you say to yourself, what were these two? And even if it was, why would be two G-men there investigating a cattle mutilation? Yeah, you're right. There's a heck of a lot more that they know that they do not want us to know about, and they'll put the clampers on, and silence is golden.
Well, not just that, is when, let's say, the ranchers, or the sheriffs in that area, or deputies, it seems like, they'll first figure, oh, this is really strange, and they'll start opening their mouth, a little bit too much. And then all of a sudden, like within 24 hours, they're denying virtually everything they said and basically said, oh, a predator probably did it. When it was clearly no proof, that a predator was there. Again, like that, I was telling you about the one case where the cow was in a pasture. It was snowed all around it. I mean, where the farmer had to go out and bring hay, to his cattle. And there was no footprints of any predators or anything in the snow. It's just a cow that was totally drained of its blood, tongue removed, eyes removed, heart was removed, and part of its rear end was removed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a body can't break down, especially laying in snow when in freezing weather overnight.
Right. Yeah, there's some other cattle mutilations